It's great to have boots on the ground in different industries and different walks of life where people are yearning for some kind of light. If I'm going to talk like I'm a Christian and I don't want to hide it, I don't want to be fake, I need to understand what to do with these questions and what it really means to be Christian.
Welcome to Cultivating Truth, a new season of Cultivating Truth, might I add, a podcast where art and faith collide. Here on Cultivating Truth, we like to have discussions of art, culture, creativity, and of course, with our foundation of our Christian walk and faith. If you're new with us, we are part of a ministry called Aletheia Legacy, a 501c3 nonprofit that exists to equip creatives for the kingdom. Cultivating Truth is one of those resources, and through our podcast, we like to have good, honest conversations with different professionals and creatives and topics that are fresh within culture, things that Christian creatives should be discussing and should be talking about. Last season, we had a host of great speakers, from Brett McCracken from the Gospel Coalition to Yancey, William Wonders III, Craig Evans, Venus Monique, and even Stephen Kendrick. Today, we are kicking off our new season with artist and animator Kevin Jackson. Kevin Jackson has been working on animated films over the last couple of decades, and you have most likely heard of these films, if not seen them in theaters. He's worked on movies such as Avengers Endgame, Hotel Transylvania, and maybe some of his most proud work coming from the Into the Spider-Verse series. Kevin has been a leading animator in blockbuster films for quite some time, but in order to be an artist in the secular world, he gives a lot of his credit and his foundation to his faith and understanding of theology and apologetics. And so for our first episode of the season, I'm so excited for you to hear this discussion with myself and Mr. Kevin Jackson. So Kevin, once again, thank you so much for joining us for our Cultivating Truth podcast. For those who have no clue what you do or who you are, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what exactly it is that you do for work?
Sure, and thanks for having me on. So I'm a computer animator. I do animation, and I've done animation for film for a little over 15 years. I graduated in 2005. I worked at Rhythm and Hughes and Sony ImageWorks and ILM on films like Into the Spider-Verse, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Hotel Transylvania, Avengers, Infinity War, Transformers, and a number of other things. And now, as of 5 years ago, I moved to North Carolina, which is where I'm at now, and I'm working at Epic Games on Fortnite cinematics, on the Lego game, and the Battle Royale game.
That is quite the catalog. So for myself, who I'm not an animator, I know very little about the world. What I heard was superhero movies, which can be live action, and then you got your fully animated movies like Hotel Transylvania, Spider-Verse, and then video games. So all of them need the same thing, I guess?
Yeah, it is a little different, but they all require the same skill set, the same knowledge, the same programs, basically. The ability to create motion and to bring characters to life. So live action animation needs to be grounded in a live world. So they need to have the weight and the gravity and the deformations that feel real. And then cartoony stuff like Hotel Transylvania or Spider-Verse, they can be pushed and exaggerated to be stylized to fit a made-up world of unique colors and shapes. And then video games is like a move set that needs to react when players hit the button, or things need to be triggered and layered together from different sources. So they all require a slightly different take of the same general knowledge of motion and life.
That's awesome. I guess the question would be, what do you enjoy most about working in animation? Obviously, you signed up for animation, but it sounds like there's all these different techniques, skills that go into the craft. It's, back in the day, animation was just hand-drawn creations. What would you say is something that you would specialize in or maybe enjoy?
The cartoony stuff is definitely my passion, like getting really wacky and extreme and exaggerated and weird. So Hotel Transylvania and Spider Verse were like dream jobs. And I've made a few of my own creatures and my own short films that I try to explore that same kind of style. And I got into it in the early days from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That movie like totally fixated me. I would pause it and draw the pictures.
Mm.
And I was also into Ren and Stimpy and Looney Tunes and anywhere there was cartoony stuff. I was pretty hooked, and I knew from that age I wanted to do that stuff, even though I didn't understand how it was done. So I always drew cartoony stuff and watched cartoony stuff. And then when I found out how to get into the career or the college, how to take that in school, like it was a no brainer.
Okay, so you've known that you wanted to go into animation from a young age then.
Yeah, as long as I can remember. Yeah, I've got actual cells of animation from Roger Rabbit hanging out around my house. That was my earliest inspiration.
That was a great movie. Yeah, you had the live action and then all the cartoons. It was great.
Roger is incredible. The character Roger. I actually took art classes from the guy who directed those films, his father. So the director's Barry Cook. He did the short films. Oh, sorry, not the Zemeckis major film, but he did
Mhm.
short Roger Rabbit animations. And his father taught in my hometown that I grew up in. So I would have lunch with him occasionally, and he'd tell me about that work.
Now, how long have you been in animation now? So you were enjoying it as a child. You went into school, college, knowing that you wanted to go into this. How long has it been now that you've been in the game?
So 2001 was my first animation, like in college.
Wow,
So my first like official like learning what I'm doing, and then 2005 was my first professional job. So professionally from 2005, man, 20 years now.
20 years. And now
Yeah.
you're working on arguably the most popular game that's out there with
Yeah.
Fortnite, some of the biggest movies that have been out there. What is it like working on these big blockbuster projects? I mean, when you knew how big the Spider-Verse movies were going, I mean that had to feel good, right? Working on a project like that.
Yeah, it's exciting to work on a project from some form of start to finish, depends on when you start on the show, and then celebrate the opening weekend or celebrate the final product. Like that's a really exciting thing in film because you're with your team or your crew kind of all the way through it. And nobody knows how the film is going to turn out when you're working on it. There are some projects you like to work on and some that you don't, but sometimes the one you don't enjoy working on ends up being a big hit, and sometimes the one you loved working on was not as successful. You just don't really know. But for me, just the art or the craft of motion itself is enjoyable. And so anytime I get challenging shots that challenge my skill and make me have to think differently on how to achieve certain motion, certain highly complex shots, that's where the passion for me and the excitement is. That's when I want to work long hours and weekends because I'm just so
Hmm. Hmm.
addicted to the craft. It really becomes somewhat of an obsession at that level. You just get kind of overtaken by it, for better or worse.
Right. Is there a project that you would maybe say you're most proud of?
It's hard to not say Spider Verse. I loved working on the film, and as I was working on it, it looked so cool. I was like, "This is definitely going to be a hit. It's got to be." And it was a big hit. But there was a moment where we weren't sure because the film is on twos, which means it's animated on a different frame rate than what people are used to. And some early reviews said it felt stuttery, and we don't know why. And people picked up on that, but that ended up being a small thing. Like it that narrative didn't stick around. Like people really appreciate the style is more kind of influenced by anime in that there's less drawings per second with a fluid background or a fluid moving camera. And that was the effect we were looking for, a more two-dimensional stylized approach. So yeah, that didn't seem to really affect most people. It was a big risk doing that, and it was so successful that they pushed it even further on the second one.
I remember whenever I saw Into the Spider-Verse for the first time. I mean, I grew up big fans, my kids, we got the costumes, seen all the movies, all the things growing up. But I remember I didn't see the first one in theaters. I don't know. At that point in my life, my kids were very young, anyways, babies. So we just didn't go to the theater, and it wasn't much on my radar. But when we sat down at home and I pushed play, the first few minutes, I was just blown away, and I'm like, this is something completely different. I love this, and it's so cool because I feel like animation over the last decade, maybe two, it kind of all looks the same with CGI. Toy Story was the first big CGI movie, and it was awesome and revolutionary for its time. But then it seems like everyone kind of mastered the craft and has, for the most part, it looked very similar. But then Spider-Verse, I think, gives a breath of fresh air, saying that animation can continue to be different and unique. Do you find that? Is that offensive that I say that, or am I in the
Not
ballpark?
at all. I love it. I love Pixar and Disney, and I love the way 3D animation started and grew up with Toy Story. I love all that, but at some point it started to look like everybody was trying to do the same thing, and you'd rarely get anything different. So I loved that Sony was willing to take chances, both with Hotel T and with Spider-Verse. DreamWorks has taken chances with recently with Bad Guys and the Croods, and then Blue Sky with Peanuts.
Hmm.
So there are few and far between, but I think that is becoming a little more common with the success of Spider-Verse, and we're starting to see a little bit more, like the Ninja Turtles movie that came out recently, the cartoony one.
Hmm.
Again, a beautiful style with lots of kind of rough scribbly effects on the frames, on the characters, on the textures. So I love it. I think it's exciting to see new, unique visual forms. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it's fun, and it makes me optimistic for the future of animation, because I was a little bit worried that we're just all going to look like Disney princesses or Pixar toys, and I think that people like yourself, you guys can bring a fresh take on a great medium. Now, we met at Illuminate Conference, which was a conference that was focusing on faith and art.
Mhm.
And I sat through both of your sessions. One of your sessions, you broke down your style and your work, and even some of the movies that didn't make it. You showed us the reels, and so you've been doing this for a long time. But what was really appealing about your session is that as gifted as you are as an artist and as an animator, you had a lot to speak on about being a light to a fairly dark world. For our ministry, we work heavily with schools and educators and getting them involved in the arts. And one of the biggest pushbacks that we get is that the arts lead down a path of destruction and darkness. And here you are working with some of the companies that, people might be fearful of, they might be scared to work with. And it seems like you're doing great things and you're maintaining your faith. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey that you've been on?
Yeah, I'd love to, and I love talking about it. So thanks for asking. I was very lucky with my family. My parents were really religiously smart in that they raised me and my sister in a way that didn't make us hate the church or hate the Sabbath. They were clever with the way they would have sort of Sabbath activities and video games for the weekend that we couldn't do or have during the week. Whereas my friends or some people I would know would sort of, oh, it's Sabbath again. We can't do anything. We can't do certain things. So there's sort of a Sabbath, the way my parents handled that, anyways, that I thought was clever in hindsight. And then my grandfather was also a pastor, and the type of pastor he was very caring and loving to the community. And he'd pick me up after school and always, not every day, but weekly, once or twice a week or a month, he'd pick me up and we'd get ice cream or a slushie from the gas station. But we had to go help somebody first. We had to
Mm.
go help the elderly or help handicapped people or just people in pain and misery or poverty. And I always hated it as a kid because I just wanted to get the ice cream or go play video games. But every experience I would leave feeling like profoundly like man, just the state of people in need. And one time I'll never forget, he took me to a house where there was a boy who was very deformed. I don't remember what it's called, but his torso was sort of shaped like a basketball with no
Mm.
neck and small arms. And it was something that was very startling to me as a kid. Um, and it's just a very, very like bad deformation. And it scared me. And I was like, Grandpa, like, I don't know what to do. Like, I was terrified. And he was like, you know what? You pretend you play all the time. Well, he doesn't get that experience much. So just pretend like you're playing with one of your friends and play with him. He doesn't get to play with many people. So, man, it makes me cry. But we had
Yeah.
like some toy cars and some toy trucks. I just went and played with them. And the more I saw him like it, like the more good I felt about it, but also the more sad. Like, it was kind of a profound thing. Anyways, man, it's tough to still talk about that.
Yeah.
But, I never forgot that experience. And that may be one of the most powerful, like, reminders of this is what Christianity is about. This is what it's, when they said, Jesus tell us the most important commandment, he said it's loving God and loving your neighbor. Like, that really landed with me. So, once you have the experience like that, along with many others, like, you end up really thinking Christianity is a force for good.
Mm.
This is a good thing for people that people need. So, anyways, I lived in the Christian community, the Christian bubble, and um, I didn't really think about atheism or evolution or dinosaurs and people, and these just things never really bothered me. And as a kid, interested in just cartoons and stuff, I didn't really take too much concern about those things. But when I took my first job in 2005, in San Diego, was where I started a small company. I was working with mostly non-believers, and with my particular church, I go to church on Saturday. And in my industry, when there's overtime work, which is often, it's on Saturday. So I would say, hey, I can't work Saturday. I go to church. Could I work on Sunday? And that was never a problem. There's religious protection for that in America. But my friends in the office, my coworkers would say, why did you go to church on Saturday? Why not Sunday? And I would say, oh, well, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. And, they'd be like, what is that? And I would do my best to say, well, we go to church on Saturday, I guess. We're not too much different in a lot of ways, but it would lead to other questions, right? Like, oh, so you think that, what do you think about evolution? What do you think about Noah's Ark and the and the animals and dinosaurs and people and creationism? And it would quickly go down this rabbit hole where I'm not prepared for those things, and I'm sort of trying to pretend like I am. And I would often either get made fun of or make a fool of myself or say something that didn't really make any sense. And that questioning of my faith and not being able to defend it eventually made me think. Like, I went home on my own, and I would think, at one point I was like, how do I even know any of this is true? Like, what if it's not true? And that terrified me. And you might say that was the sort of conviction I needed, that sort of lit a fire under me that said, I need to understand what's going on here. Because if I'm going to talk like I'm a Christian and I don't want to hide it, I don't want to be fake, I need to understand what to do with these questions and what it really means to be Christian. And that was both scary and exciting at the same time, because it got me thinking, like, okay, where do I start? What do I do? And I always remember it. I actually have the fragment here. I think it's P52. It's the oldest surviving New Testament fragment. It's a replica, of course, of when Jesus was with Pilate, and Pilate said, "Who are you?" And Jesus said, "I am truth." Well, that claim, I think, is a wild claim. I am truth incarnate. Like, what does that even mean? So
Mm.
I thought that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with seeking truth. What is truth? What does it mean? How do you discern it? And if God is really truth somehow, then I will find that. If not, then I'll just become an atheist, right? That was kind of my naive thinking at the time. And so, yeah, I started asking, okay, what is truth? I started writing things down. What is truth? How do you know it? And somewhere I found William Lane Craig and his YouTube debates with atheists. Um, I collected books and resources like William Lane Craig and Alvin Plantinga and Edward Fesser and a number of others, as well as atheist resources. I said, I'm going to read, because that's what I was dealing with were atheists, were pretty hardcore, and sometimes hostile atheists in the workplace. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to read atheistic literature and I'm going to read Christian literature and I'm going to try to understand the arguments. And that's when I shifted from trying to believe something or trying to make somebody understand or believe something to like, I need to understand what I believe and what they believe so that I can engage with it honestly, authentically, and graciously. So that's kind of, I know it's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how it started. That's what lit the fire under me. And that's what got me into apologetics in the first place.
Wow. So you mentioned names such as William Lane Craig, Alvin Plantinga. I'm assuming this assisted you all while you were also reading people. And from previous talks, I know you've mentioned Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. So you read that stuff as well. It wasn't just that you were reading from the Christians, right?
Right, right. So the book of the God Delusion, I remember seeing it in the store and sort of like having a physical like, ugh, like in a
Start.
naive way. Yeah, it like scared me. Like that's the bad thing over there. Um, but I watched William Lane Craig and I didn't understand everything, but I thought, this guy's confident and makes a lot of sense. So I'll read both. So I read Dawkins and I wrote down every argument and I would stop if I didn't get something. And I would read William Lane Craig as well and I'd write things down. And eventually I started to understand the framework of a logical argument, where the assumptions lie, how to logically deduce or Aristotelian logic. I even enrolled on a free online course on logic at some online class because I wanted to understand how to interact with the material. And pretty quickly, I started to understand where the fallacies are and the real power of Christianity as a logical framework, as a source for logic and rationality. And so the fear dissipated really quickly and it became replaced with excitement and interest. And I just started to like reading
Hmm.
and researching things and finding out where the issue lies and how to resolve it or where the tension is and how to think differently. And I learned a lot in that process just to get clear thinking. And I think a lot of people or a lot of Christians I have met are afraid of that because they're afraid that the logic and the thinking is going to undermine the belief, which is what the atheists say. They have this tension between faith and reason. They say, you know what, it takes blind faith to be a Christian. I need reason. I believe in science, so I could never be Christian. And you have on the other sides, not everybody, but some Christians who sort of agree with that dilemma and say, yeah, I choose faith. Um, and when you do reason and philosophical arguments, you're failing the test. That's not what it's about. That all sort of bothered me, but I found it to not nearly be the unsolvable dilemma that it's presented to be. And honestly, it didn't take long. You know, a few of those books and a few of those arguments with William Lane Craig and a few of just kind of understanding the logic. I could read the literature on from Dawkins, Dennett, Christopher Hitchens, and Sam Harris, and I could spot the problem on my own. Like I felt equipped and armed, and that was valuable because that translated into the workplace when I would have the same objections I might get like a year or two ago. Now I was like, I know exactly what to say here and how to handle it. Then you just practice grace and you practice making sure you're engaging with them in a way that opens up their mind and it's not hostile and aggressive in return kind of a way, but a little more diffusing and whatnot.
Now, hearing your story, one might assume that, you grew up in a Christian family, but you had Christian education,
Uh-huh,
right?
uh-huh, uh-huh.
So you going on this journey, I mean, you grew up as a believer and you had educators pouring into you. So it sounds like you would say that there was something a little bit different. Maybe you had your theology, you had your training, but maybe the interest wasn't as much there. Or would you say that it was more about when the rubber meets the road?
I'd say a little bit of both. The theology and training in school wasn't too intense, but also I wasn't super interested as a kid. Yeah, and I might just call that academics and books and things, like not really enjoying that. And maybe not really struggling with what's being taught, like not really caring, I guess I could say as a kid. But also not really, I think in my community per se, there wasn't a really strong emphasis on this is what atheists say and here's how to fight it. Like there wasn't any of that. So it wasn't like these atheists sort of Reddit atheist arguments that would even be talked about in school. It would be more a sort of traditional in-group thinking of biblical stories and things that just kind of worked for me and didn't really make any negative tension for my life. So there was a lack of true like rigor on my end of the more academic side of things, and a much more effective like lifestyle thing of like this is an effective way to love people and to treat people. The thing that was different outside of the Christian community where the objections were new to me and the tension was not emotional, it was intellectual.
Mm,
So that was the main shift. And I wouldn't say that any of my schooling didn't do a good job preparing me for that. I just think that they're operating mostly within a community that does not interact with that very frequently,
mm.
depending on the classes you take. Now, I didn't take lots of theology classes. I just took the bare minimum requirements and then a lot of art classes. But I did take one philosophy class that I found deeply interesting, even when I didn't like reading. So it went about as far as the class went, and then I was, back into the art. But yeah, that shift from an emotional way of thinking to an intellectual way of thinking just kind of lit a fire. And it was a practical one because I'm engaging with real people and I'm on the line. I'm feeling tested myself. So, it felt like I have to be able to, I have to understand this if I'm going to talk this way or I'm not being authentic or there's something wrong.
Yeah. So understanding apologetics is a big part of your story. What has been some of the points that you feel like you've had to go to the most in your everyday life and interactions with maybe non-believers?
Yeah, it's interesting. In California, this was in San Diego and in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles much longer than San Diego, but the conversations would generally go the same three places: the Genesis creation story, Noah's Ark and all the animals,
And
and
it
then
just for them it just sounds too fabricated. It doesn't sound realistic.
right, like the science is out and these things have been proven false, and evolution and the age of the earth and all this stuff from a very, very strict, literal, biblical kind of dating and reading. And so one thing I learned again, just pulling from the way Jesus interacted with his followers and with the people he talked to, something you can notice is the way he talked to people, and the way he knew who he was talking to. And this, I was infatuated with this for a while because it seemed like if he was talking to someone in good faith and they were genuine, ordinary people, he would talk to them in good faith and he would talk to them directly. If they were Pharisees trying to trick him or trap him, he would answer in riddles that would put them on the spot and make them think. And if he was dealing with indifference, he would go silent. He just wouldn't speak. And I think that takes a lot of effort and sort of practice to kind of learn how, at least in the beginning. But once I was able to do that, I was able to think, okay, what's really being asked here? If they say you really think Noah's Ark happened and 8 people and all the animals got on it and the whole world flooded, they're not asking about Noah's Ark and did it really happen. They're asking, are you an idiot? Like, do you really think how, like the test is me. It's not the Bible. It's not anything else. The test is what are you made of? So that means you need to read those stories, think about those things, and make up your own mind on it somehow. So again, a few interesting things happened. Like if you can learn about it and read about it, that's one thing, right? But you're eventually going to be regurgitating information. But if you can put it in your own words and write about it a little bit in your journal, then you can start to think about how to answer the question. So with Noah's Ark, per se, Noah's Ark is easy. You just say if Noah and his people paid their taxes, they could have solved climate change and he wouldn't have had to build the ark in the first place. No, I'm kidding. A little joke goes a long way in those moments.
Yeah.
But what I would say to them is, look, I've read the story. It's like 10 sentences long. There's a lot packed in that story. I don't know the totality of the story, but it looks to me like the author wrote it to be taken seriously
Mm.
because it's real people tied to a genealogy that stretches throughout the entire Old Testament. The only book that doesn't fit that genealogy is Job, and not Job nor the land it took place in has any connection to any archaeology or finding. So I don't know what to do with that book, but it's got a powerful message. And in the same way, it looks like Noah's Ark is written to be a true story that really happened. So I'm not giving like a clear answer to something I don't know clearly, but I am saying I've thought about this and there's a lot of interesting things going on. And then they'll take you seriously, right? Then they're okay, you're a thinking person. And then the questions will change from you really think that to like, well, what do you do with evolution then? Right? And now they're not like just like trying to poke you to make fun of you. They're like they genuinely want to know like how did you resolve this? And that's
Mm.
great. That's a great place to be. And you talk about evolution and say, look, what I know about evolution is they say, do you believe in evolution? I'll say, I don't think it's something you believe in. I think you understand it or you don't. And I was like, there's a long time I didn't understand it, but I'm trying to understand it. And when people say evolution, I say, what is the claim? Like define the word. What do you mean? Because the way I see it is evolution makes three fundamental claims, and I'm not really concerned with claims beyond that. One is the change in diversification over time, which I think is obviously true and can be observed. Another one is the thesis of common ancestry, that everything came from a single organism. And I was like, I don't think that's true. And I think there is a lot of data and changes in the atheistic evolutionary biologist community that's saying it's looking more like an upside down tree or a cobweb with multiple origins of life. And then the third thing is the mechanism that drives the change of one kind of thing to another. And here's where most of the controversy lies. And here's where, in my efforts to understand it, I don't believe I've seen that anywhere. And instead, what I see is a claim that a kind of thing can morph into another thing on its own. And I think there is, as opposed to little evidence for it, there is a really strong logical fallacy or a philosophical problem of the essence of a thing becoming the essence of another thing. That breaks the law of identity. And that was hard for me to understand for a long time, so I don't expect anyone to click. But from my understanding, that's a real problem. So it's not to say evolution is false, but if it happened, it requires something external to make it happen,
Mm.
right? So it could be that God used evolution to create the animals. I have no problem with that. Um, but yeah, for one thing to change to another, it's like the number one turning to the number two without addition, or the number one turning to the letter A without anything external. Like that's the core problem. Mutation and genetic like changes. We have no examples where they produced beneficial changes that lasted, that transferred down the line. That just doesn't happen. The beaks get longer when they go into the Galapagos Island thing. Yeah, that's a change in diversification. That's not a kind of animal becoming another kind of animal. So, anyways, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent. Those are a couple of things that is me showing them I'm safe to talk to. You can bring these things up, and I've thought about them. And I'm going to talk to you about them. And if you're interested, I'd love to talk more. Like that's the underlying hope, and that's when conversations get really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you understand that there's different schools of thought. And one of the things that I always find in some of these things that are debatable is sometimes people get so caught up on one definite answer into something that no one can factually say that we know. And
Right.
from what I'm hearing from you is, well, here's some thoughts, this could be a thing, this might not be a thing, but you continue to measure it back and forth with the truth that you do find, and that is rooted in scripture. Am I picking that up correctly?
Right. So with the questions they ask, I'm hoping to get eventually to the point of, well, why are you Christian? Why are you Christian? Like what are you hanging all this on? Which is where I say, hey, I think God exists, and I think this is logically provable, philosophically provable. It's unavoidable. I think Jesus Christ raised from the dead, which is a different discipline. It's a historical discipline, but I believe that's true for various reasons. And with those twin pillars, all my Christianity is hinged on those two things. How the Bible was written is important, and that's something as well that I can talk about with people. But it's mainly God exists and Christ was raised from the dead, that I can tell them this is what I'm hanging everything on. If there's a story I don't know what to do with in the Old Testament, then I think, does it invalidate my belief in those two things or contradict
Hmm.
it? And it does not at all. So those problems evaporate, and I end up with more questions on like why did God do things this way? And that make me think about God's actions or God's interactions with the people from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And that takes me in a different category. That takes me in a God exists and Christ was raised from the dead. What do I make of some of these hard stories? And I can share that with them and show them that I don't have all the answers and there are things that bother me, but they don't defeat the underlying foundation.
Hmm. Well, and I love that you give that nuance. I think it's very much needed. And one of the frustrating parts I have heard from people with opposing viewpoints is sometimes perceived arrogance that might come with Christianity, to where, okay, it's cool. You are confident that Christ resurrected from the dead. But what about this or what about that? And sometimes there's a trap where people find that they have to give an exact confident answer to everything. And I like to use the analogy, look, at some point we all have to park our car and we have to walk inside the event. Some people feel the need to drive up closer and that makes them more comfortable. Some people are very comfortable with parking their car far
Mm,
back and they know they got a spot and then they can keep on going. We all have to wrestle with that, but no one is going to park inside of the actual event. I mean, we all got to at some point get out and then we just got to walk.
that's the great analogy. Yeah, I like that.
That's our faith. And whether you're an atheist, agnostic, Muslim, Jew, Christian, everything is based off of faith. No matter what worldview you have faith that your worldview is correct, and then therefore you must take leap and you must make the jump at some point in whatever it is that you believe. The interesting thing about what you're saying is, even with your education, with your background, the teachings from your parents, is how important it is to educate yourself. There might have been teachers who said some of this stuff to you, but at one point you just either didn't really care or it wasn't practical. Who's going to ask me these questions?
Right.
And you began feeding yourself. And I think Paul talks about that, right? You're no longer on your mother's milk. You now have to eat steak. You now have to be able to provide a nutritious meal for you in order to continue your discipleship journey. Do you feel like you are on this journey of your faith? At some point, we have to eat some thick food, and that means I have to digest some hard truths.
Absolutely. I think everyone is going to be tested at some point, no matter what their worldview is or what their lifestyle is. They're going to be tested, and they're going to have to find out what they really think. Um, and it can be sad and difficult and annoying and all kinds of things. But the test is ultimately good for us. It builds our character, and if we face it and ask God for help, like I think it's a transformative experience that makes your faith your own. It makes you find your own voice, your own worth, your own confidence, and allows you to interact with people in the world without fear. Be in the world, but not of the world, that kind of thing.
I fully agree that this is a huge problem that I don't think that just you encountered, but many Christians. One of the fears of working out in the secular world is there's not proper training, there's not proper thinking and understanding. What I like to tell students is your faith your own? Or is your faith your parents' faith or your pastor's faith? Do you have your own faith? And I think if we could approach our faith and our beliefs as you did to, well, let me measure this. Doesn't mean I have to have all the answers, doesn't mean I have to know everything, but do I fit comfortably in saying, yes, Jesus is king? And I can say that with confidence. Do you have success stories that you've been able to share about your faith, or maybe intellectual exchange over a series of time to go deeper with other individuals?
Yeah, yeah, great question. Yeah, I noticed after I got comfortable with the apologetics angle and just being able to handle these conversations in public or at lunch with friends, it would open up the doors to real questions and real pain. A number of examples, I can think of several where a person has said, you know what, I don't care if God does exist. I want nothing to do with him. And that's an honest thing. And it's good to hear that. It's good that they're willing to say that. You've sort of broken through all the surface level stuff. So that's when you want to make sure they're comfortable saying how they really feel, and you're not going to shame them for it or make them feel bad. And you hear all kinds of stories about pain and suffering, how the church treated them, or how a loved one of theirs was hurt or something went wrong in their lives. There's all kinds of things, and there's real pain there, and there's real anger there. That's when things get interesting, and that's when things get important, I think, to really listen and make sure they're comfortable talking to you, and to just be quiet and or ask questions to learn more. Um, to me, that is a success, and that is as successful as we as a person can be. And that's when God takes over, and that's when the Holy Spirit can take over. Your job is to just make sure they know you're available and you're open to those conversations. And sometimes they do come back. Sometimes you get an unexpected phone call, or I've had people come and find me in the hallways or at a quiet time at work and say, I heard what you said at lunch. I overheard that. I've never heard that before. I want to know more. And I think those are great feelings. That feels like something's worked. And it's again, I try to make sure I don't get carried away with myself. It's not about me. It's about them and God and their relationship to God, and just being as supportive as possible in that. So that's what I consider to be successful. Whether or not they convert or what they do with that information is on them, and it's not for me to say. But yeah, if somebody opens up about their real pain, and I can give understanding and love in that pain, I think that's a win. And I think that's the best a Christian can ask for, to set an example and to really show somebody I care about you as a person. And I'm sorry that this hurt you, and I understand why you're mad at God. I honestly get it. And then just leave it there. And it's incredible. Like, I think people really want to talk about these things, and people crave meaning and understanding, and wherever the pain and suffering is coming from, it demands an explanation, and they still want that. But when they eradicate God from the possibility of solutions, then they have no solution. There is no solution but suffering, and that leads to pessimism and bitterness and denial of meaning, and it leads to dark places. So I think if that idea gets planted, that seed gets planted, it picks away at people. You never know when they come looking for you, or just on their own journey. So that's what I consider, yeah, successful.
So whether you're an animator, you're in construction, or a doctor, people may find themselves encountering these conversations, especially for the believers, if they claim faith. What books or
Mm.
individuals would you like to recommend to those who are out there who feel that they are in a hostile environment, or maybe a place where they don't feel so comfortable talking about their faith? Who could they begin reading, listening to, or studying from?
Yeah, great question. So my most influential author book is Francis Schaeffer, the trilogy.
We love Francis Schaeffer here at Aletheia.
Incredible book. To me, that cuts to the heart of everything. And that made me start seeing apologetics as opposed to the goal itself, to just the gateway to the goal. Like, apologetics helps me clear the confusion at the surface, and then Francis Schaeffer helps me penetrate the issue, or shed light on the issue, and it helped me tremendously in that aspect as well. And something in film in my industry is we watch a lot of films and a lot of shows, Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Avatar, like uh, it's every day it's talked about, right? Every day. And Francis Schaeffer has such an incredible way of connecting philosophy to ideas of philosophy that get dispersed through film and through media and absorbed by the general public at large, and sometimes to the degree that we don't even know what we're absorbing. Those shows and those movies and stuff, while I couldn't go into a church and say you should absorb all this content, I wouldn't say that, but I would say understanding the messages in that content and understanding the sort of Schaeffer theory of saying, hey, this content, if it resonates with you, it is either exploring a problem of your worldview, right, of pain and suffering or origins or destination or meaning, or it's offering answers on those things. And if it resonates with you, if they bring up the show or you're talking about the show, that's an opportunity to poke at that question, be like, what does this say about morality? Is morality fixed or not? Where does it lie? Is it Nietzschean? What a human is, the identity. Is it Jean-Jacques Rousseauian or not? Like Avatar, I think, is downstream from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. But these things become vehicles to ask those questions. And if you get the opportunity to share the Christian worldview has the answer to these things. And that's something that's interesting is the shows that I think are the most popular and resonate the most with people, they don't offer answers. They just explore the problem and they leave you with the problem. This is more true of ever than morality. There are movies that open up the door to an idea that there's no morality. It's all an illusion. It's all a feeling. And they leave you with that. And that's a really destructive idea. But they can't answer it. There is no answer. Christianity is the only answer. And much of film and much of Hollywood will not go there. At best, you'll get Buddhism as a solution, which is, again, I think, is a half solution. It doesn't address pain and suffering. It denies that it's real. It's illusory. And the individual, as you are, is not important and ought to be shed entirely. So there are a few directions that Hollywood can go in the end. But if Christianity is not one of them, then there is either no answer at all, or
Mm.
it's a partial answer or a denial of the issue.
Do you think that you can tackle this understanding worldviews, even if you would not classify yourself as, an intellect? Do you think that there are different, ways that people can dissect and try to understand worldview analysis?
I do think so. And there could be multiple ways to do that. I'm not sure how to answer it best because, to be honest, Francis Schaeffer's trilogy was really difficult. For
Mm.
me, it was a hard read. I had to stop every few pages. I remember the hardest thing for me was Hegel. Hegel is a philosopher in the 16th century that reconstructed the idea of truth. And that was a really hard thing for me to get. I spent months trying to understand Hegel before I went back to Schaeffer. So I might have gotten 3 or 4 pages into Schaeffer in the beginning, and then I was in Hegel for months because I just didn't get it. Um, I think I get it now, but that was how the rest of the book went for me. I kept having to stop, be like, who's Carl Jaspers? And what is this existential experience? Like, just all over the place. And I enjoyed it. I like that sort of thing. Most people might not. But there is a Schaeffer book that's easier to read called How Then Shall We Live? There's another Schaeffer book called Art and the Bible that's incredible. There's Nancy Pearcey, who I think is even easier to read, who has books like Total Truth and Saving Leonardo. And then there's shoot, I don't have it near me, but there's an academic book that is Understanding Worldviews that is also really simple to read, and it breaks things down into categories and worldview charts that I think anybody could understand. So, and they were students of Schaeffer as well. So I think the worldview angle is powerful.
Mm.
It skirts the label of religion that means different things to different people because people say I'm not religious, but everyone has a worldview. So it connects to everybody. And it can be simplified into very basic things like what does this say about morality? What does this say about the origin of everything or meaning and purpose? And everyone resonates. Everyone wants that. Everyone wants answers to identity problems, what it means to be human or male or female. And so super powerful and absolutely, I think anybody can dig into that and at least start to understand that
Well, and
that, that thing.
and as you stated with, these topics on evolution and certain arguments that people would bring up, they're not necessarily asking about those points. They're asking about your credibility. Do you have the ability to discern and properly understand what's happening here? And I think anyone could do that with movies. So maybe you don't know worldviews. Maybe you don't know what is existentialism or nihilism or Gnosticism, you don't understand these different worldviews or terms, but you might be able to ask, what do you think that the message that this movie was trying to say? And you don't use words such as morality or ethics, but you say, I think the bad guy might not have really been a bad guy. And then you begin going, oh, well, where does that leave us? For our family, no matter what we watch, if it's just Sarah and myself, my wife, but also with our kids, even if it's an animated cartoon, we sit back and go, what do you think that this movie was trying to teach us? And sometimes we find that just because the movie's trying to teach us something doesn't mean that we even agree with it. It might be teaching us or having a message that we have a contrary view, but it's okay
Hmm.
because they're trying to tell a story, and that doesn't mean that everything that tries to teach us something is objectively true.
Hmm.
And I do think that you can have those conversations even with children as a family. And I think movies is a great exercise to be able to go through and say, okay, what is reality? What is this life? What did that person make a good decision? Let's go Lion King. Simba found out that a lot of his perception of reality was a lie, but he needed to become the leader that his dad always knew that he could be. You can have those conversations that are uplifting and encouraging, and it begins giving you the exercise, I think, of one day being able to open up a book and say, oh, actually, this worldview where I can do anything sounds so nice and fun, could actually be destructive because I actually can't do everything, but yet I've been told my entire life that I can do whatever I put my mind to. And the
Exactly.
Bible is contrary to that.
That's a great point too, because it doesn't even have to be a total worldview explanation or conversation. It could be a very minor one. Like I think, unfortunately, the sort of sexual revolution or the sexual nature of today is one that tells people sex is not a big deal and you can have lots of it and endless amounts of it, and little things like that, or they seem little, that might not be a completely comprehensive worldview, but can leave you with maybe lifestyle choices that leave you later on in pain and suffering. So yeah, I think that's a great point.
Do you think that there's hope for Christians working in secular spaces like the ones that you have worked in the past? Or should we be running away from those types of places?
That's a great question. I do think so. But could there be a time where one ought to not be involved in some way or area? Sure. Like I don't know totally, but I do think it is great to have boots on the ground in different industries and different walks of life in maybe unexpected areas where people are yearning for some kind of light, um, but may not have found it or may be turned off from a traditional Christian community. I find that often, frequently in my career, where people want to talk to me about God and the Bible and about specific things, but they say, I never got this from church. Like, all I got was to close my eyes and swing my hands back and forth and feel the spirit. Like that kind of turned me off. I didn't know what I was being told there. So, yeah, I would say overall, yes, it may not be everyone's calling to be everywhere, but if you find yourself in a place like that, I wouldn't ignore the opportunity. I would use that to grow and understand and share it with people. I think that to me is the most meaningful part of my life anyways. I mean, all I want to do is make film and make cartoons, but being able to have these conversations is such a source of meaning for me that it
Mm-hmm.
transcends, any work that I've done.
And Jesus says we are called to be a city on a hill, a light to a dark world. And it's so cool seeing people like yourself have influence. And we see this, someone's inside, right? Like Amazon's opening up the doors for House of David and The Chosen. You have these other organizations that are greenlighting these projects that are faith-based. So it seems like someone somewhere is doing great work, and it just might be Christians who are in the industry that so many of us find ourselves running away from, but Jesus tells us to redeem and restore, not run away. And I think that people like you are great testimonies of that.
I appreciate it. I'm so thankful for the opportunity. It was unexpected. I did not expect my career to be involved in that way.
Man, it's so cool. Well, what's next for you? How can we keep up with you? What projects should we be on the lookout for? And how can we find you?
So, I mean, I'll be moving into a more intensive role on Battle Royale, the main Fortnite game. I don't know quite what that's going to be. It's coming up in May, so that'll be the main part of my career here coming up. I also teach animation classes online. It's called Lupin House. It's a little animation online school that I think is a lot of fun. Um, and I'm on LinkedIn as well if anybody wants to connect there. So yeah, that's kind of my short-term roadmap.
Awesome, Kevin. Will we be sure to put all of that into the links into the bio so that we can stay up to date and find you? Brother, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for being faithful. I think you hear stories of former believers who go into these spaces and then they just don't know how to handle it, and then they give up on their faith and they lie over for waste. And it sounds like you took this as a challenge, and now you've been utilized as being the light into this industry. And so I think that that's very inspirational and encouraging, as we are hoping that artists and creatives, they hear these stories and it motivates them to go out there and continue to create beautiful things that's going to engage the culture, ultimately inspiring them even maybe for the gospel.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Aaron, for having me.
Well, that was it. Thank you so much for tuning in to our episode of Cultivating Truth with Kevin Jackson. We're so grateful to have artists like him come on board with us, to hear and to learn from him, to encourage us, give us resources that we can go out there and also be a light to this dark world. Once again, Cultivating Truth is a part of a 501c3 nonprofit, Aletheia Legacy, where we exist to equip creatives for the kingdom. If you want more resources like this, and you want us to continue to build resources where we can go and spread the gospel and spread creative tools out there for creatives, then I would like to encourage you to maybe consider donating. You can go to our AletheaLegacy.com webpage, and under support/donation, you can go there and give a gift of any amount, and maybe even consider being a monthly supporter. We greatly appreciate you listening, and even viewership, commenting, and sharing videos like this. Just help spread our resources and spread the ministry of Aletheia Legacy even further. Thank you guys so much. Blessings.